Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human existence.
Hello, it's really wonderful to be here again, especially for a topic like this one. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
I feel energized and ready to tackle what is maybe the most challenging subject we've ever covered, the nature of reality itself.
It really is. And today we're trying to create a kind of shortcut for you, our listener, to understand this huge paradigm shift.
Right. Moving from what we call duality, the world of us versus them, or me versus everything else.
The non-duality, absolute unity.
And our sources give us a bit of a roadmap here to understand three things. First, why we suffer psychologically. Second, how modern science actually validates this very ancient concept. And third, the single counterintuitive method, the non-practice, to access this state.
And it's so important to frame this correctly from the start. We aren't talking about abstract philosophy here. This is a psychological investigation. The main argument from all this is it's radical. The singular, controlling, separate self you think you are. It's an operational necessity, a survival tool maybe, but ultimately, it's an illusion.
Let's start there then, with the problem that sends most of us down this path in the first place.
Yeah.
Psychological suffering. Why does life so often feel like an endless struggle?
That suffering, it comes directly from the assumption of duality. The moment you believe there's a permanent separate me inside this body.
Separate from the world out there.
Exactly. A world full of threats and things you want. That creates a constant state of striving. It's the root of being a control freak.
Ah, right. That desperate need to manage every single outcome, because if I don't, then I might fail.
Yeah.
Or worse.
That's it. So the distinction is huge. It's not the external world causing the stress.
It's the perceived separation.
Precisely. And this is where things get really interesting, because our sources make a profound statement. This is not just some mystical, far-out idea. Science supports it.
Okay, so when physicists look at the very nature of matter, past molecules, past atoms, down to the quantum level.
Whoa, hang on. Let's not drop that bombshell too quickly. When you say science confirms this, I mean, how can our listeners reconcile that? The solid reality of their hands, the chair they're sitting on, with the idea that separateness is an illusion.
That's a powerful and necessary question.
Yeah.
Our brain evolved to see edges, right? Boundaries. It's literally how we survive.
Sure.
But at the fundamental level of reality, those edges just dissolve. Quantum physics tells us that matter isn't stuff.
It's potentiality, probability waves, interacting fields.
Right. The distinct particles we think we see are fundamentally unified.
Yeah.
They all share this common underlying ground. The illusion of separateness is a function of our perception, not the reality of the universe.
So the reality we experience as solid and separate is really just a highly efficient simulation run by our brain.
A necessary one. But underneath that simulation, there's only one thing happening.
Exactly. And that's why the same conclusion has been reached by these profound philosophical systems all over the world. In the Indian tradition, this is known as Advaita.
Which means not two.
Not two. And what's fascinating is how this pops up everywhere. In Anatolian and Sufi culture, it's called Vadet, unity.
Their core idea is often summarized as there is no existing thing except God, or the fundamental reality.
Yes. The universe isn't made of separate parts. It's a single, undivided ground of being.
So for you listening, think of it this way.
Yeah.
The self you identify with, your memories, your body, your job, is a character in a movie.
Okay.
But the fundamental reality isn't the character. It's the screen the movie is projected on. And that screen is unified, unchanging. It's there for every single character.
So if the goal is to shift from being the character to being the screen, where does the typical self-help journey go wrong? Most people start with mindfulness, stress management.
Raja, yoga, tai chi, things like that.
And those methods are wonderful. They're necessary for regulating the nervous system. They deal with the contents of consciousness.
Managing thoughts, relaxing the body.
But they usually hit a hard wall.
And that wall, it often shows up when an instructor says something like, notice your thought and gently invite your attention back to your breath.
Right.
That instruction actually reinforces duality because it assumes there's a me doing the inviting and a me who owns the attention.
They skip the essential question, the critical pivot, which is asking, what is the entity that is noticing the thought?
Oh, that's a huge distinction.
You're asked to look at the thought, but not at the source of the awareness itself.
So if I'm stressed about, say, my finances, standard mindfulness tells me to observe the stressor, the content. But non-duality tells me to ignore the stressor and observe the awareness that perceives it.
That's the entire shift. You move beyond the fluctuating contents, the feelings, the thoughts, the body sensations, and you look at the constant, unmoving field of consciousness itself, the awareness that is there before the thought.
But hold on, doesn't the brain create thoughts? Couldn't a thought just be noticing another thought?
From this perspective, no, the thought stream is just data processing. The cognitive machine running its programs, it's reactive.
Okay.
True awareness, this unmoving ground, is what makes the cognition possible in the first place.
Yeah.
When you ask, what is the observer, you start searching for the non-objective ground that everything else appears on.
Let's go back to that analogy of the television or a Zoom meeting screen.
Yeah.
It helps anchor this. We see 10 distinct faces, right? 10 separate individual forms.
But if you touch the screen, the physical thing itself, it's one single undivided surface. The faces are just forms, illusions created by light. The screen is the constant reality they appear on.
Our worries, our bodies, our lives, those are the images.
And the awareness that witnesses them is the screen. So the practice becomes stop identifying with the images, rest as the screen.
So once we make that pivot and turn our attention inward toward this pure awareness,
Yeah.
what are we even looking for? How do you identify something that isn't an object?
You identify it by what it's not. This core awareness is non-objective. It can't be perceived by the senses or contained by the mind.
So if you find something with a quality, any quality,
It's still an object. You haven't gone deep enough. This awareness has no shape, no age, no boundary, no sensory qualities. If you can define it, you've missed it.
the second we try to locate it, we turn it into another object and we fall right back into duality.
Exactly.
And that explains why it's so incredibly difficult to talk about this using language. Language is our primary dualistic tool. It's built on comparison. This versus that, here versus there.
Absolutely. When we use words like emptiness or energy, they're just pointers. They're placeholders that break down because they are still dual concepts. True understanding requires a kind of mental leap.
A leap inward.
Yes. Turning attention past the signals from the body, past the brain's chatter, and just resting at the source. It's like escaping what the sources call the perceptual prison.
The idea that we're trapped by our five senses and our dualistic mind.
That's a perfect way to put it. You shift from watching the film from your seat to realizing you are the consciousness that allows the theater, the film, and the audience to even exist.
So let's talk about the payoff. If someone manages this shift and they learn to rest in this non-objective awareness, what actually changes in their life?
The outcome is the end of psychological striving, and therefore the end of psychological suffering.
Because the striving separate entity just dissolves into the field.
Yes. And that leads to a deep, deep state of inner peace. The acceptance of reality stops being a concept and becomes an experienced truth. You just realize what happens, happens.
In our source material notes, a profound real-world effect. A deep, effortless flow. Life just seems to go well. And I imagine this isn't magic. It's about the absence of resistance.
Precisely. When that separate I is no longer fighting the current, pushing for one outcome, resisting another, all that energy becomes available. Decisions feel intuitive. Action becomes easy because you're not burdened by the anxiety of controlling the result.
This connects back to that matrix metaphor. Suffering exists because almost all our attention is glued to the fleeting, dualistic world. The illusion of the separate self.
The anxiety comes from clinging to something we instinctively know is temporary.
Freedom, then, is letting go of the attachment to that specific temporary identity.
The fundamental freedom is realizing you can still interact with the world, you can earn money, raise a family, build things, but you don't have to identify as the one who is desperately fighting to do it all.
So, how do we get there? This brings us to that counterintuitive method, the single non-practice.
It's called non-practice because it requires no specific time, no posture, no special place, and really no mental effort in the way we usually think of it. It's just a subtle redirection of attention.
Okay, so let's walk through the steps for everyone listening. Step 1, notice a thought, any thought.
Step 2, immediately shift your attention away from the content of that thought and toward the source that noticed it. Look at the background screen, the witness, the awareness itself.
And step 3, rest your attention there.
Simple, yes. Easy, absolutely not.
Why not?
The mind is a content-generating machine. It does not want to rest on emptiness. This requires a lot of persistence. The sources are really clear on this. You might do this for months, even a year or more, with what feels like no immediate results. The mind will snap back to content instantly.
Because you're retraining an evolutionary habit that's thousands of years old. The brain's job is to keep your attention on external threats and internal stories.
And every time you shift back to the source, you are building a new attentional pathway. You're not looking for a new object, a sensation, or a mystical flash of light.
You're looking for the space before all those things arise.
That's it. So if we look at the bigger picture, this whole shift requires us to stop focusing so much on all the external and internal demands, politics, the economy, personal goals, even body awareness, and instead recognize the fundamental unified ground of being.
That shift in perspective is the only real psychological liberation.
But I have to ask the question I'm sure is on many listeners' minds. If I really embrace this, that the me is an illusion, doesn't that lead to a kind of fatalism? Or irresponsibility? If what happens, happens, why should I bother trying to make the world better? Why even get out of bed?
That's the fear of the separate entity. It's trying to protect its own territory. But what we find is the opposite happens. When the burden of being the separate controller is lifted, action becomes effortless and moral. Action still flows, but it flows from a place of unity and peace, not anxiety and striving. You still get out of bed, but you do it from a place of doing, not doing, for me.
So what's the final thought here? Our sources remind us that life is fundamentally about living and doing, not just knowing.
Exactly. Intellectual understanding is just the map. You can memorize every street name on it, but you still haven't taken the journey.
So if this concept of the unmoving witness or the unified screen, if any of that resonated with you, use it as an immediate invitation.
Don't be satisfied with the philosophy. Seek the experience. Don't just read about the view. Turn your attention inward right now and engage in the non-practice.
We've taken quite an exploration today into some very challenging territory,
Yeah.
moving beyond duality to the single truth that underpins all experience. Thank you for joining us on this exploration into the mechanics of human existence.